today I am putting together this. Now, about assembling, and did a bit of assembling and did a very good job videoing because I don't have stands for my cameras. Well, I do have a stand for a camera, but not a live stream camera. Come on, rotate the camera, flip the camera. We were talking about how to check if the bearings are right for the crank and the crank's all right. In the last video, we had a huge gap right here for the bearings. Now, we still have the original bearings that we bought because we're not allowed to return them. So we're stuck with them, but that's fine. And here they are, the original bearings, which don't actually fit. They are the wrong clearance because we made a mistake. So you guys don't make that same mistake. Just note that on the bearings, they will say a completely different number to what it says on the website. So if you're reading the website and you're choosing your bearings, base it on the fact that it's in imperial measurements. So when you read 030, that is essentially 3 thou, 30 thou something. That's a 30 thousandths of an inch. That's what it was. So 30 thousandths of an inch is 0.030. That's what 30 thou is. Okay, so that's what I bought. I bought 30 thousandths of an inch oversized bearings. We found out there was absolutely no way that we're going to get a bearing to suit. It was because the bearings that I needed would have been 1 thou oversized for the cams, 11 thou oversized for the crank, and I could have gotten something for the crank, but we decided we should just go with the standard stuff because it wasn't really much, and I might run into the same issue again. Taking less chances, it's well within spec, it should be fine with what we've got standard-wise. So we got the standard bearings here. Once again, this is all going together with standard stuff. These are 30 thou. No, not those. Those are standard. These are 30 thou oversized, and we thought they were 0.03 millimeters oversized. We're wrong. So 0.03, I believe that was 0.5 millimeters. So we wanted 0.3 millimeters. We got 0.5 millimeter oversized. Okay. On top of that, the people who distribute those bearings, also on their site, say for this, if the number on your lobes is a certain number, buy this. That's essentially what they say. These bearings will cater to this dimension perfectly. And then when you change sizes, it says it has to be about this measurement. Change sizes again, it has to be this measurement. And that's how they do it. So what we got to do, guys, is remember that all this stuff is going together now. When you're checking if your bearings are correct, you do it by hand, and your crank should just freely spin. So it doesn't spin perfectly. It's not a balanced. Nothing's balanced. Nothing's been ground. It's all brand new stuff. There is a very low chance it's going to spin freely anyway because it's a heavy crank. But that is spinning free enough that it should be quite right for the application because she does spin without me continuously adding force to her. So that's a good sign. If I can turn this by hand and take my hand away like I just did, that means that we've got the right bearings. Now, it's not perfectly spinning. It's pretty hard to spin. What you're expecting to see is this thing, it will slow down anyway, but you'd expect it to keep spinning. If it takes force and it just instantly stops when you take your hand off, probably the wrong size bearings. But if it keeps spinning, that's a good thing. That is lowered resistance. There is resistance to turning it because you're trying to turn all that weight. You're trying to turn it on the frictious surfaces that are holding it, clamping it, etc. So what we've got to do now, guys, is going to be very difficult for me to do these videos. I've got to make sure this is centered, which it is because those walls are perfectly sized to the crank. I've got to foot-pounds, which is about 80 newton meters of torque on the bolts. The manual doesn't specifically say those numbers. It just has 3 numbers, and I had to figure out what those numbers represented. And I was taking a guess that the lowest number that I could see that made any sense, 58 foot-pounds was 80 newton meters. So I validated that before I said these numbers are what they are, because there's nowhere in the guide that said on any page that I was looking at what these numbers actually represent. It didn't say foot-pounds. It didn't say newton meters. It just said number, no idea of what those numbers represent. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the middle, forwards, backwards, sort of thing. So that's what we're going to do. Like I said, the video is going to be very hard to put together. I had the tools and now I've misplaced them. I'm actually missing some stuff. But to set all this up, I'm going to put the torque wrench down over here. And I might start by trying to, put all these screws in with something like my hand. Because what we're going to do is get this all assembled. Once she's assembled, things will get a little bit easier or harder, depending on how things go. I don't know how we're going to do this. This is the torque wrench. You can't see much. Not from there. Not this towel. Can't even see much now as it is. This is absolutely horribly hard to do these videos. So what I could do, because I need to make sure you guys can see, or else this is just a waste of everyone's time. This is a terrible engine stand, by the way. If I had a choice, I would buy a brand new one or fix these wheels, because these wheels are just garbage. Absolute garbage. So I'm going to move this as close as I can without damaging anything. And we can sort of see. I don't know if you can see which one I'm looking at. So that one there. And this is on loosen, so it's not going to tighten these bolts up. So what we do, I'm cheating a little bit because it's like an impact wrench. You're actually meant to put the bearings in properly first and slam the casings in. I don't know actually what they're called other than top caps. You're meant to slam them in first before actually tightening all these down. The order I'm going to do it from is the middle, because it's the highest loaded one, to the rear, something like that. So there's going to be rules to which I have to apply when I do this, and I have to figure it out at the point where I'm torquing. So where is the most load? The most load is at the rear of the engine, since that's where all the forces have been applied. The least load is at the front of the motor, where it's just driving belts. So in order for us to torque this down correctly, we start from the middle and we work our way to the back, then we work to the front. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for that nice balance. I could be wrong, but I'm basing it on what needs to be the most secured parts. And then we can go over it again, and it doesn't matter what order as long as we're checking the torques are correctly spec'd. Like I said, I haven't actually banged these in. You're meant to hit them with a hammer or something. Not a hammer, but a mallet hammer. I've still got the mallet, so I can put this in a second. And you should really balance out the way you torque these things as well. So when you do this, you should do X amount here, X amount there, X amount here, X amount there, blah, 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 blah. So these are 58s. The Conrods are 34s for foot-pounds. So when I'm talking foot-pounds, because I need to talk about it in the sense that these numbers make sense. And also because the tool I've got, the only one to torque it down is actually Imperial tool. So I can't use metric measurements on the Imperial tool. It'll be just too hard to convert otherwise. So I've got the Imperial measurements. Use the Imperial measurements and we'll be okay. This is actually a sticking bolt for some reason. She just went hard. Just to make sure it's all good, there's a few things you've got to keep doing along the way. What I do, just make sure that's in. Because these bolts should go straight away loose. And then what you do is you just check it by hand. It's still free spinning, so that's a good sign. As soon as it's too tight, that's a very bad sign. You want to stop. What I'm going to do now is I'm up to the point where it's pretty close to the time. They're going loose. We can safely assume that this is going to be okay to torque them down now because they're very close. So I'm going for 58. 58. So I'm in the 50s. About 58 there. And now, like I said, we start from the middle and we'll work our way out. I'm going to start like this. I don't care how tight they seem, this thing doesn't go pop easily anyway. So this is what we're going to do. We're just going to tighten them up as little as we can by little, because it'll be okay, and then we can check how the crank likes it. And then we can go to this one, because this is the pattern we're going to be essentially following. It doesn't matter how you get them backwards and forwards here, it's still a circle. I want to make sure they're all nice and locked down before I go ahead and torque them to spec, and everything's nice and even. Not to mention, if the thing goes tight, that is a bad sign. If this all of a sudden just goes tight, the crank is not allowed to be tight. The crank has to be nice and free spinning. It's got a heavy oil in it. That's nice and free spinning still. Okay, now it's time to go to torquing. So it's time to spec it. So to get this in spec, there you go. That's in spec. One's in spec. That's another in spec. Another in spec. That's another in spec. You could check these as you go before just tightening them. That one there, I should loosen and just redo that. Make sure that's actually the right torque. Because we didn't do the button, not early enough anyway, the button was... That's right, cracked. Also, it's a good time to just check the crank spinning nice and freely. Seems good. Because this is what happens. When you're doing torquing of stuff, you sometimes make the mistake of not pushing in the button. It's a button. It's a button. Okay, I'll do it like I did everything else. Okay, so that's all done. What I can do is now, it's all at spec, so if there's any tightness, this will be hard to spin. It stops like it should, it does what it needs to do. In my theory, it should actually run a bit smoother than that, but this is a diesel, so expecting there's a little bit more resistance with this than others. So make sure it's all nice and done, because if I do put this in the car and they're not actually done to spec and they actually come loose or something, then we're in trouble. So make sure she's actually in spec. That's tight, tight. Like I said, this is the point where you don't actually have to worry about order, because it's just checking, and if there's anything loose, it'll just get done up as you go. Because the other one was just meant to keep balance. I don't believe they'll be coming undone when we put the motor back in. It's a possibility, yes, unlikely to happen. Okay, so bottoming part one is done. We now have the next part of the job. Checking all the pistons are here. Knowing what number order they are. This is piston number 1. And this is actually going to be the hard part to actually show. To get this in. I'm actually doing this by hand because I'm crazy. To get this in, I need to figure out which one is number 1. Number 1 is over here. And I need to make sure that I don't scratch up the lobes. So it's a good idea when you're going along to get something, preferably a towel with or microfiber cloth, and just clean the bearings as you go, but I haven't been doing that. I'm naughty. Very, very naughty. It's a recommendation that should be done. You should actually do this. It's not one of those things like I've just done the crank. That was naughty of me with the crank, so don't do what I did with the crank, guys. I just threw it in there. Because this is this isn't actual fragments of, you know, anything really bad contamination wise, but this is the part which has the least material and will wear out the quickest out of both components. If any dirt gets in there, it's very hard to get it out once the motor's together. Although it does throw dirt outside, so you don't want to wear your bearings out excessively. Okay, so they're the original crappy bearings. I'm now up to these bearings, and everyone should know what these bearings are. These are the correct bearings for the bottom end. They have the little yellow dot, orange dot. I don't even need to do much. I'm going to keep the knife away from them. So what you do when you normally do this is this is actually the wrong way around. We have to actually do this to figure out just one part, what the specs are for that part. And, if I'm not mistaken, this can now be turned around, in which case we can now put the pistons in. And before you put the pistons in, you should realistically go grab a cloth, run it up and down their liners, make sure it's all clean. Make sure there's no black stuff on it, because there's dirt that's going to build up on it over time anyway. It's not going to be terribly bad because these haven't been machined for a while. In fact, they haven't been machined, but we've cleaned them off once. Don't worry about the deck surface so much, because that's when you put the head gasket on. So, almost there. And we haven't really bagged up our pistons, so this is a heavy duty diesel. It gets plenty of lubrication. I don't think the dirt's going to do. I don't believe the dirt's going to do much harm to it. See the piston. Here she comes. So this baby boomer right here. I have to get these nuts off. And that'll be 12, 14, something along those lines. I believe it's 14. Well, looky. 14. It's raining, by the way, outside, in case you haven't noticed. Because I honestly didn't notice. Which is why I'm telling you guys. Now, I've got to figure out how I'm going to crack this. Because this is actually really tight. How am I going to crack this? Okay, guys, good question. How do we crack this? I'm going to sit it upside down for a second to think. Okay, I've got the trick. So I can't exactly do it right here in front of you, but I'm going to do it over here on the vise that we do have. I'm going to put a towel around the conrod, which is worth about $600, brand spanking new, surprisingly, because I can get one conrod for about, you know, $600, $500, brand new. That's $2 grand in parts just to replace this part here that I'm touching, this whole assembly. What I'm going to do, because I don't want to damage it, is also because it throws it out of balance. I'm going to get a towel. This towel that I've been using, I'm going to wrap it around, pull it out. And I know I put it upside down, you shouldn't put the piston in that way, but I had to do it for a reason. And I put the conrod in the vise, because there is bearing material on the sides. You just need to be careful you don't scratch or score anything up that you don't want to have scored up. You also need to make sure you don't clamp anything you don't need to clamp. You only clamp the things you have to clamp and leave it alone. That's all you do. Ah, Dad, you make the voice so loose. Why are they so tight? Okay, so they're loose now. Loose as a goose. I can do this by hand now. So you've also got to realise, these con rods are not designed to be twisted that way. They're not even, those bearings shouldn't be that tight, not like that. That's ridiculous. So when you do that, you're also twisting this assembly, which could damage it. That's one of the reasons why I have to grab it as close as you can. It'd be better if you could grab it from this surface, but the best way out would be probably to put a tube through that hole and then crack the nuts, because this is all doing damage that we don't want to do. So when I put these in, I have hoses somewhere, offcuts of hose that I've got to use. And what we do is I've got to pull the bearing apart first, and I've got to get the bearing materials that I need for this assembly. These things are pretty easy to slide out. I normally go to this section here and just push it out, and it works very, very well for this assembly. So that's one bearing material out. That's another bearing material out. Now, I need to figure out where I put the bearings. We said we're going to keep the knife away from it, because if we put the knife in there, it could scratch it up. We don't want to do that. So, there we go. Got a hole in the bag now, because you can do a lot. You can scratch these up so easily. It's not even funny. So you've got to be very careful with these. And you can put the bearings, these materials in first, because they're all the same polishness, essentially, material polishness. That'll be fine running. Also, cleanly surfaces is a good idea. Keeping everything as consistent as possible. So this is actually a little bit rusty. It's not going to kill anything, but I'm going to clean it, because that's what we got to do. Just make sure it's all nice and clean. Look at all that rust that comes off. All you need to do is lubricate that surface. That's all you got to do. And make sure you don't lose your bearings, because I've already lost one. I know where it is though, since I can see it. Okay, so now what I got to do is I'm better off touching the bearing material with my skin, not my anything else. Just got to drop this in here, and what I do is I put my thumb on one side and then get on the other side and slide it in and adjust it as it needs to be, because normally when you push it, it normally goes nice and square. So there we go. Now we've got a bearing in, and that's just one of 4 pistons we got to do like that. Same thing with the top. What I do, I get the bearing, I put a streak of oil straight through the middle, because all the oil is just going to get pressed apart anyway. I find the slit in the bearing, put that in the slit, put my thumb over here, put my thumb over there, push it in, bang. The oil presses out the sides, and she's good. Now, I remember very clearly this went on like this. And it should make sense when I check the piston head, which way the piston goes. So that's pointing to the crank. So this is number 1 piston. Number 1. Take the bearing off. Now, I'm going to have to check everything, because you've got to make sure the offset between here and here is all 180 degrees apart, something like that. So I'm going to rotate this to one position, and this is the point in which I have to do this to every single piston. Make sure she's offset to the right point. So I'm offsetting that over here. I'm offsetting this one to over here, and then this one here can offset to the top. So I'm going to use this point here, and this point here as my guides for where I'm going to offset the rings. So there's the offset there. So the top, that's the oil ring. For the cleaning ring, it's to the smaller circle here, and to the, sealing ring, to this surface here. So that's what I'm going to call them. But before I drop this in, what I'll do is I'll put this in sort of, making sure it's facing the front of the crank. That is a nice tight fit. There we go. Went in. And no, you do not use a hammer to smash pistons in. I've done that once before, and trust me, the damage is not fun, especially when you have to order parts from UK. That's the only place you can get stuff from. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the same logic. Oh God, why do we tighten all these things? The same logic to the top rings here. That ring goes there. That ring goes there. Sealing ring goes at the top here. So sealing ring goes there. Sorry, the oil ring goes there. That one goes over there. Okay. I don't know why we put on these bolts so hard. That's gonna be a headache. Tell you what I'll do. I'm gonna wrap them a little bit. And I'll quickly see if I can crack them all, because these are all 34mm torqued. One cracked. Two cracked. I'll just, essentially this is how I'm going to process it. First step is to crack the bolts. Second step, set the rings. Make sure she's still up top. She's still over here, and she has moved over there. Set her back down with looser rings. Make sure she's overhanging the right side of the table. Do the same thing to every single piston. Crack those things so that we can just straight up go ram, bam, 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 bam. This should only, realistically, if you're doing this properly, this should only take 1 hour or less. It's not a big job to crack them. It's not a big job to reassemble the bottom end. It's a bigger job to get the right parts, organize all that stuff, and put the motor in is another one of those big tasks. Okay, and the reason I haven't pushed in this piston is because if I change how I want to offset the rings, I still have the opportunity to change it how I desire it, but in the manual it says to offset it equally And by doing it the way I've done it, essentially, this ring has to go through here, then it has to go through there, and then it has to go through here. And there's enough, yeah. So goes through there, goes around, goes through there, goes around, goes through there. It's not perfect, but it's gonna work. So we're up to the last one. Go away, rubbish. And I might still have to pick up my dad tonight, but I also have to go shopping. But I have to do this because I need to order all the parts in. So I might as well just get the bottom end together. Well, we still got life in us, mate. Like I said, offset the rings appropriately. You go here, you go there. And you go there. That's right. And put it around. So that's done. Now it's time to get these in. Normally you use a piston compressor. I've done this by hand before, but this is much harder. So what we'll do is I'll probably find out if I have a compressor. This is the arrow to the crank. Make sure all the rings are in the right spots. And I'll compress those rings with the compressor. Nah, I'm going to be manually doing this. Okay. Well, unfortunately, there's one or two options. Oh! Changed my mind. Here's the tool. Where's the rest of the tool? That's the question. There is something missing, guys. I've got the tool, I just found it on the table. Maybe that's how it works. Oh. I'm learning, guys. I'm learning how to use new tools. Oh, not me, my tools. That's the wrong way. Okay. This is not a perfect tool. So what I do next is I go in here. Ah, dang! I can't do this like this, I'm going to get cut. I have no more tools. I've only got this. So, like I said, I'm going to get cut because this thing is literally broken. Let's see. No, shan't compress it any more than that to ring. So what we do now, guys, is we don't use a hammer. We don't. We cannot pelt this in. We literally need to push it in. So it's mostly, well, you do a little bit of both. It's a weird scenario. Before I do this though, to avoid doing any screwing or any damage to the bottom end, I'm going to grab this towel. I'm going to go over the lobe because I want to protect my lobes. And I'm over the lobe. So the problem is this compressed. I'm literally going to get a mallet and smack this thing up. Not the piston, not the motor, just this tool. I'm just checking it because this tool's a bit dodgy, too dodgy for me. Oh, if I can get one piston in, I'll leave it at that. This is a fibrous block of wood. I don't like it because it's fibre. There's too much fibre coming off of that, so I won't use it. What a bummer. You're running into all these problems at the very moment you need something. Every problem, every time. Come on, there's a block of wood. Wood. That's plastic tube. You gotta be kidding me. We don't have any wood. Oh, I found something. And I know what it's from. This is a handle, a wooden handle of a hammer, a very heavy hammer. And I'll use this. I'm hoping that I didn't just break a ring, because if I broke a ring, I'm gonna freaking kill this tool. This tool is just junk. I seriously mean it. If I crack a ring, I'm gonna kill it. This is junk. This is junk, guys. Where the hell's the bin? Need a new one. I gotta check this out now because I'm not happy with what friggin' I just heard. She seems alright. In my book, that's not a good sound because I'm literally trying to put an engine together here. I'm not expecting the tools to friggin' break on me. This is not going to be easy, but I can push it in. I need the right tools to do this or this will never work. Okay. So if I'm going to do this, I can't really work around these rings, but I've got to get one piston in place. So this is the first time you're ever going to see the crudest install of a piston because of Michael the Mechanical doesn't have a working compressor ring tool. This is actually one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Because this is a much bigger piston than I'm used to. This middle ring has so much expansion, compression, sharp edges, you know. Makes the hardest install of a piston ever. So what you need to do, you essentially need to get the piston ring in, work your way around it. This is ridiculous. No washing fluids, everything's going to hell. So essentially what I've already figured out, guys, I'm not going to get that motor together. Those rings are too big, those compressions are too high. I need a ring compressor, because the one I got is junk. You do not use junk. Do not try to do things as crude as I tried to do it. So, apologise the video cut out. Apologise it feels like a waste of time, but if you don't have the tools, you can't do the job. So, my next step is to essentially pack up, go to the shop, get a new compression ring compressor thing, and use a new one, because that one, the spring steel plate sheet thing is not going parallel to the rest of the shit. I can only use toilet paper because there's no towels anywhere. This is literally what I'm reduced to, guys. A paper towel from the toilet to wipe my hands. I'm going to leave it this. I have to talk to you guys when I've got the motor together, but you got to use proper tools. You can't use second-rate hand grenades to put a motor